Hey everyone, welcome back to the video. So today we'll go through label reading and what to look for on different labels and how to read them. And then we'll talk a little bit about what words to watch for on different labels and what to look for when you're looking at the ingredients and if you're comparing two different products. And then we'll talk a little bit about claims that you see on different foods that you might see sugar-free or you might see reduced in sodium and things like that. So we'll go through a few claims just to hopefully give you some tips when you're at the grocery store to pick out different foods. Basically, when you're at the grocery store, that's when you can start and make some good food choices. So hopefully you can pick up a few tips to make your next trip to the grocery store a little bit easier. So when you're looking at a label, one of the first areas that you want to look at is at the top right under nutrition facts. You'll see a serving size for that particular food. And it's a really good place to start just because, especially if you're comparing two different products, you want to make sure they're the same serving size. And different products might have different serving size. So you might be comparing something that's 1 cup per serving to something that's half a cup per serving, which doesn't tell you a whole lot. So first place to look at would be the serving size. And then if you go on the right side, there's going to be a whole column of percentage of daily value. And that's basically telling you what's the percentage of a certain thing. So if you go for sodium, if a food would be 50% in sodium, that means that you would be getting 50% of the sodium that you need in a day from that serving of food. So it's a nice place to look into, and it can tell you different things. Some people will go and look at sugar right away, but like we talked about previously, sugar is a type of carbohydrate, so it's a good idea to go and look at the carbohydrates just because the sugar will be included in that total carbohydrate. So if you see an amount of carbohydrate, for this example, you would have 17 grams. So the 17 gram is going to include fiber, it's going to include sugar, and it's also going to include starch. And like we talked about last time, fiber doesn't raise your blood sugars. So it doesn't raise your blood sugars like starch or sugar will. So if you want to know the exact amount of carbohydrates that are going to affect your blood sugars, what you can do is take the total carbohydrates, so 17, and you do 17 minus the amount of fiber, which would be 3. So you would be left with 14 grams of sugar and starch combined. So that's a good way to look at it. And if you're going for foods that have a little bit more fiber in them, obviously it's going to take away a little bit more of that number as well. So if you're looking at different labels, especially if you want to compare two different products on how much they're going to raise your blood sugars or how much they're going to affect your blood sugars, going and looking at carbohydrate is a really good place to start. Some people will look at sodium, some people will look at fat, which you can look. Both of them don't raise your blood sugars. They don't do anything for your blood sugars. But it's a good idea, especially, let's say, for sodium. If you're looking at it for more of your blood pressure, it's a good place to look at. A quick tip, we talked about like the percentage of daily value. It's a nice guide, especially if you're just looking quickly and you just want to glance at a food. So if you're looking at the percentage, a really good guide, if something is over 15%, it would be considered high. So if you have like a can of soup and you would look at the sodium, let's say, and there's 20% of sodium. So that can of soup would be high in sodium. And then if it's under 5%, then it would be considered low. So if you have the same can of soup, but it would be 4% of sodium, then that can of soup would be considered low in sodium. So depending on what you're looking for, you might want to look for something that's high in a particular thing. Like if you're looking to add more calcium to your daily life, you might want to find foods that are over 15% in calcium just to add more calcium. And if you're looking to limit things like sodium, you might be looking for foods that are low in sodium, so going for more of the foods that are under 5% or as close as to 5% as you can find, especially if you're comparing two different products. So that's a quick kind of glance at a label and hopefully to help you make better choices. And if you're comparing two different products, it's good to know what to look for and where to look on those things. So when you see different food, you'll see that there's different words to watch for. So basically, especially if you're looking at the ingredients, which could be a good idea if you want to know what is actually in a food. But you'll find all kinds of different words on there, and some of those words might look extremely fancy and they might not tell you a whole lot. But basically, depending on what the word is, it might actually just mean something very simple. Like if we take a look at the sodium or salt side of it, so you might find, if you're looking at the ingredients, you might find salt in there, you might find brine, you might find things like soy sauce, garlic salt, but all those things will be basically counted for sodium. So if you're seeing more of those words, then you know their food's going to be higher in sodium. If you're going for sugar and you're looking at the ingredients to see what the ingredients are, and you'll see different foods in there like fructose or sucrose. You might find honey in there, you might find liquid sugar, syrup, corn syrup, molasses. So all those things would be considered sugars, but they will be all listed down in the ingredients. And one good thing too, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but if you're looking at the ingredients, the first ingredients is whatever is highest in that food. So if the first ingredient is fructose, then for that particular food, fructose is going to be the main kind of ingredient in there. So as you go down, the first ingredient is the main ingredient, and then the second one would be the second biggest ingredient. So if you're looking at a food and you see that the first couple of ingredients all basically mean sugars, then you know most of that food is going to be made up of different sugars. So there's a couple of different things on here. You'll find like fats, saturated fats, and different words for them too. As far as diabetes, you might be looking only at sugars, or you might be looking at sugar alcohols too, just to figure out what's in different foods. And then there's also going to be claims on top of different packaging, and you might have seen them before, and there might be a claim like free of sugar, and then people don't always know what it means, but it doesn't mean that there's no sugar in that type of food. If you, like you can see on screen, it's just going to mean that there's less than 0.5 gram of sugar and less than 5 calories per serving. So with the free of sugar, you might find foods that it says sugar free, free of sugar, without sugar, no sugar, zero sugar, all those things. But it could still be less than 0.5 grams of sugar per serving for that specific food. So it's a good idea to look at the serving too, and then if you're eating multiple servings, it might be adding just a little bit of sugar. And then the next claim, reduced in sugar or lower in sugars, it just means that food is 25% or at least 25% less sugars. So it's basically comparing it to just a regular food. So if you have a regular, let's say apple juice, and then you have next to it something that says lower in sugars, it means there's going to be 25% less sugar in the lower in sugar one compared to the regular apple juice. And then no added sugar, basically they're not adding any sugar, or they're not adding any ingredients that do contain sugars, like we talked about just previously, different ingredients that are basically sugars, but they don't use the word sugar in there. And then one thing to look at the bottom too, you'll find some foods might have light on them, and people often go for those kinds of food, but it's basically more for, it doesn't mean that there's no sugar, it doesn't change anything in the sugar. It's more for the type if there's lower in fat or things like that.